Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us for this evening's program, which is being presented as part of Women's History Month. My name is Lisa. I'm with the Tampa Hillsborough County Public Library, and I'm joined today by my friend Vivian, who's going to be keeping an eye on our Q&A box for us, and by today's presenter, Kayley Melton. Kayley is the VP of Courseware Innovation Labs at KnowBe4, a published information security illustrator, a lifelong geek, and above all else, an artist. Kayley, welcome. We're looking forward to your program.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm going to go ahead and pop my camera off and hand the reins over to you for presenting.
All right. So hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you could be here today. I am here to talk about how I went from surviving to thriving in an often unforgiving industry, that specifically being information security, but I know that a lot of women in tech positions can definitely commiserate as well. So yes, as was said, I am VP at KnowBe4. I've been in the information security business for 10 plus years. I'm a published illustrator. You can see there, Analog Network Security, and the forthcoming book Meta War by Win Schwartau. Honestly, I knew I would be introduced, but I really just wanted to make sure everyone had the pleasure of seeing me dressed up as David Bowie for Halloween.
I'm going to jump in and say, if nothing else, I appreciate
it. Thank you. Thank you. So, yes, today I'm going to talk about how I went from my working class roots in the heart of Appalachia through geeking to escape from that life in all of its glorious dysfunction, and how I then manifested myself as an executive today currently at KnowBe4. And along the way, I'm hoping I can turn all of the things that I've learned going from each of those phases into lessons and resources for you. So I talked a little bit about, in the summary of this talk, how I've overcome different types of barriers to entry, some of them location and culture based, being born in extreme poverty in Appalachia. And when I say extreme poverty, I really mean extreme, systemic, intergenerational. I didn't know anyone in my family who wasn't subject to living in poverty. But I also talked about different types of discrimination. Of course, being a woman in tech comes with its own brand of discrimination, but I've also experienced sexism from the start, before I even left high school, which we'll talk about in a bit. And additionally, my gender identity and sexual orientation are both quite gay. So that was something that was not okay in Appalachia either. And additionally, the reason I have this picture of myself here in a hospital bed is because I suffer from a lot of invisible illnesses, rare genetic diseases, chronic pain, that kind of thing. And a lot of times it's easy to assume that because someone looks a certain way, there's nothing going on under the surface. And in fact, for me personally, I know that there's an awful lot going on under the surface, suffering that I've had to overcome and heal over time, and then things that will be with me for the rest of my life. So yeah, just a quick compassionate reminder to, give your fellow humans that benefit of the doubt, because you never know what's happening underneath the surface. So that being said, what was it like to grow up in Appalachia? We see it played out in stereotypes, in different types of media, comedians, different types of music, especially certain kinds of country music. But what did it actually mean to grow up Appalachian? Honestly, was quite a bit like the stereotypes, to be honest. um, I reversed the usual order to put the bad and the ugly first. um, but definitely a lot of that extreme intergenerational poverty that I'm talking about. Um, I feel like a lot of people in America might be surprised to see the depth and extent of the living conditions and the just general poverty and all that comes with it that still exists to this very day in Appalachia, especially in the areas where I'm from. And that being Eastern Kentucky, Southwestern Virginia, Eastern Tennessee, that kind of area. I added this picture because you can see behind me is the town where the town I consider my hometown, and all the mountains in the distance. So when I say isolated from the world, I truly mean isolated from the world as well. We had to travel over an hour to get to just a Target, honestly. Going to Target was a special occasion because we had to travel at least an hour to get to the nearest Target. A lot of the things that you hear about, that extremism, sexism, racism, um, illiteracy, chronic stress, labor-related injuries, especially injuries that are being worked through when a lot of people might have to stop working entirely, really pushing through it. A lot of generational trauma and destructive addictions, as you can imagine, in an environment like this where everyone is highly stressed out, a lot of dysfunctional families, yeah, a lot of generational trauma. And even the environment can often be toxic itself. The area where I'm from had toxic water tables from a variety of reasons, the biggest one being coal companies who blatantly refuse to take care of the toxic waste that comes along with that process. So yeah, kind of a downer. But at the same time, truly a lot of good came out of it as well. I'm not just saying that for the sake of the full phrase. Um, extreme resilience, and so much endurance and work ethic that, as I said before, labor-related injuries are really common because most people are in a labor-related job. And so if you have to keep working to keep food on the table, to keep surviving, working through that pain takes a lot of resilience and endurance. A lot of community-driven support systems, very rich cultural heritage that I grew up totally immersed in, and that heritage still influences the arts of today. I mean, I currently live in Nashville, and everyone knows Nashville is the country music capital of the world, but we might not have country music if it weren't for bluegrass, which came directly out of the culture that made me. And ultimately, a lot of self-sustainability, the ability to fix your own machines, to figure out how to, I don't know, engineer things out of whatever's around, and more importantly, to grow your own food because you might not have the money to pay for it or the options otherwise. So, yeah, that's the good and the bad and the ugly. And what that looked like for me was a lot of being a little wild thing, roaming cow fields, eating food plucked straight from the garden, riding in the back of pickup trucks. My favorite thing, as it says here, was to find mud anywhere, whether it was a creek or a puddle, and just squeeze it between my toes. As long as it didn't involve brushing my hair, I was okay with it. So a little more about what that early life was like. This is my mom's side of the family, minus one uncle who wasn't in the picture. And this is my dad's side of the family after the birth of my cousin. And in both of them, just to point it out, you can see the mountains in the distance. This was a gravel road for a lot of my early childhood. I can remember when they came through and paved all the back roads. But yeah, basically the things that I was just describing about Appalachia reflects in the people who made up my immediate family on my mom and my dad's side. My mom's side had the hustling and gardening and bootlegging, and my dad's side, my dad was a Baptist preacher. So after they were divorced, not long after I was born, those dichotomies just got magnified more and more. It was interesting trying to decide whether I should fit in with the wild and free side of my mom or the very modest and quiet side from my dad. But yeah, I don't want to trauma dump or anything like that. I recently just learned that phrase. But my childhood did leave scars on me that I still to this day work to heal and transform, and I've been working at that for at least a decade. But at the same time, I pointed out the good for a reason, because it's exactly those good things about Appalachia that made it so that I could be here from this position telling this story instead of a myriad other options that would have been easier and more likely. So when I was a kid, the key thing for me was finding solace and seeking ways to gain more knowledge and wisdom. I was super awkward, considered gifted as soon as I got into school. I was something called hyperlexic, which means that I learned to talk and read and write very, very early, before I was a year old. But being in a situation like Appalachia, especially with underfunded schools, I was very reliant on the teachers around me who saw that potential and gave me outlets for that. And two of those were the library and getting to spend extra time on the computer, which ultimately introduced me to the thing that would guide the rest of my life. And additionally, there was that nature component. It was and still is one of the most important ways for me to recenter myself and move forward with peace, I guess you could say. At least more peace than when I walked outside. So here's our first little gem. If you're in a position like mine, and even if you're not, it's important that you find ways to explore. And I really encourage that to be outside, but it doesn't have to be. Just think about the things or the places you resonate with the most, and then figure out fun ways to sink yourself into that. Keep your mind open and see what sorts of fun things that you can come up with, especially if it seems only slightly related. Those are always where I find the most growth, I'll say. The next gem, as I did, use the library, and I promise that I wasn't coerced into saying this because it's a library talk. Truly, the library was huge for me. I would ride my bike several blocks down the road almost every day, especially on breaks, and just sit and explore the shelves. And nowadays, there's so many different ways to interact with the library that you can learn anything about anything. And with extra workshops and classes, you can get connected to people in fields that you're interested in, all sorts of cool stuff. And finally, teachers are truly a gift. I know that young people can sometimes eye roll about teachers, and there are bad teachers, of course. There's good and bad of everything, but when you have a good teacher and you allow yourself to have that mentor relationship with them, they can change your life forever. At each step of my journey, it's not an exaggeration to say that it was my teachers who saved my life, who got me here at every single step of the way. They can find you extra resources, give you guidance, and I think most importantly, give you confidence in yourself and your own abilities. So, how did I continue falling in love with tech? In middle school, as many middle schoolers tend to do, I started to get quite angsty. Granted, my life was a bit dysfunctional, and all the things. So I spent an awful lot of time online trying to escape that dysfunctional life. I took sick days so I could be at home alone on my computer, like coding websites in Notepad in bare text, plain text. Um, I was introduced to MMORPGs really early on and made a lot of friends doing that. I would come across these lengthy plain text documents of hacker literature and I would just devour them because at the time it just wasn't clear to me how I could connect into that world. So any little thing that I could find, I just absolutely devoured. Um, so around this time, excuse me, my Uncle D became my first mentor, I'll say. Um, he was a serial entrepreneur, a true mechanical genius, in my opinion, and ultimately the most important title, the bestower of silly tricks. most most vitally, how to make funny faces, like taping your nose and things like that. um, he was my favorite uncle, still is, and always made me laugh and still does. But ultimately, one of his serial entrepreneurships was becoming an ISP, an internet service provider for our tiny little backwoods area. At that time, it was kind of a big deal because he was going to offer DSL internet. And if you don't know what that is, just look it up to see how long ago it was. I don't really want to think about it. But he needed a certification from Cisco in order to be certified to do these things. And he didn't really need the networking portion of the certification. So I did it for him in middle school. He paid me a tiny amount and I helped him get his certification. He also exposed me to a lot of really fun .exe scripts that I could send to my friends and do really fun things like pop open their disk drive or bring messages up on their computer and things like that. And then outside of that, he gave me my first job. He, again, a serial entrepreneur. He had a shop that was a card shop, like Magic the Gathering type cards, and movie rentals and pool tournaments. A lot of different things at once. And I ran the store during the summer while he did yet another business. Um, Ultimately, I was already deeply in love with computers, but my Uncle D really gave me the mechanical depth and interest in that that I needed to get to that next step, I guess you could say. So the little gem in this is find a mentor. They can be anybody. I mean, My family was quite dysfunctional, as I said, and yet I found my first mentor outside of teachers, to be fair. I found my first mentor within my family and my uncle. You can find mentors in any community that you're a part of, school or a religious organization or an after-school program. You can intentionally find them through things like this. You never know when you're going to meet your next best teacher, and a good mentor will not only just show you how to do something or give you an example, they're also going to challenge you so that you continually improve and get better yourself. So after middle school, we arrive in high school. In high school, within the first week of freshman year, I switched into the A+ networking class, and I loved it. I loved it. I had tested out of typing, if you can believe that, to move into A+. I was memorizing everything, studying diligently. The material was so hard, and yet I was obsessed with it already. I just loved walking through network simulators and learning all the diagrams and things like that, like a total nerd, I know. But the issue is I could not get the teacher to take me seriously. My friends were in the same class, all guys, and they made fun of me for being such a goody two-shoes because they frequently cheated and goofed off and things like that. And they thought it was funny that I cared so much and tried so hard. But the truth is that teacher, in spite of all that, never learned my name. He would call me by the wrong name. He wouldn't allow me to participate in the other guys in the class would get to do on sorry, let me back up. The other guys in the class would get to hook up networking and things like that for classes. And so I never got to do anything like that, even though I was acing tests and just begging practically to be involved and to learn more. And I couldn't. There was a moment where I was hearing this teacher encouraging these guys who didn't really care to get Cisco certifications, and I couldn't even get him to call me the right name. I couldn't get him to acknowledge me or even answer me when I asked for help. So all that to say, I was incredibly dissuaded, as you can imagine, by this. That teacher got a new job the next year, and the art teacher took control of the tech classes for a while. Ultimately, that class ended being, again, dismissed and literally asked to quietly heed my male peers who were less capable, I'll say. And then when a new teacher came in, I thought again, oh, maybe again, I'll get a new teacher, I'll get back into it. Except that this teacher was noteworthy for having female students sit on his lap. And when I refused to do that, I completely left networking behind. Networking, hacking, computers, but I still made money doing that throughout high school. I took local freelance jobs with a local real estate company, setting up their website with all the listings and things like that. I did numerous jobs using these skills and working in a small family business that my mom started when I was in high school. You can see me here running for student council president with one of these ridiculous signs, but still I was almost disgusted at the thought that I would be doing this as a career, largely because of that experience that I had had with those teachers in high school. So at graduation, I was kind of adrift, as it says here. Even though my mom was incredibly supportive throughout my entire childhood, she didn't push me to go to college. I was happy just staying at a local college and going there and kind of, I don't know, figuring it out, drifting into the background, I guess. And luckily there was a guy who's doing like volunteer counseling. I don't know what else to call him, but that's what it felt like, doing volunteer counseling at my high school. And on the way back from an academic team competition, a state competition, I was hitching a ride back with my AP calculus teacher and this volunteer counselor, and they were horrified to hear that I hadn't really applied to colleges. Most deadlines were already passed, and thanks to their very insistent urging, I decided to go to Center College. And still, though, I didn't really know what I was going to do there, and I certainly had no idea what I was going to do in general. So the gems here as we transition to college are disregard your haters. I ultimately didn't allow those negative experiences to keep me from learning more because I still was teaching myself all along the way, regardless, at home on my own time. But it still influenced how I felt about an industry and what a potential career might be like, and was completely blocked from trying any of that until it was necessary, as you'll see later. And ultimately, piggybacking off of that, take your learning journey into your own hands, because ultimately you've got you and you know what you're interested in and what you're going for. And we live in a time when you have so many free resources out there to help you get where you want to go and be who you want to be, that don't wait for someone, especially if they're a hater. Don't wait for permission from someone else. Go ahead and start educating yourself. There's a lot of different ways to do that. So college, as it says here, amazing and terrible all at the same time. Ultimately, I ended up as an art major with a couple minors, but the best and worst thing was suddenly my socioeconomic status in the larger world was crystal clear in a way that it hadn't been before. I didn't realize that in the strata of classes that I was way down here and everyone else kind of started up here. And reckoning with that underprivileged state of having grown up in that area, underfunded, lack of access to things, it was really hard to reckon with. Additionally, I also realized I was extremely gay, as I mentioned in the beginning, which was exciting and terrifying because I had heard people in my own family threaten the lives of gay people. It wasn't safe in any shape or form to be gay when I was growing up. But at college, I found my weirdos, my gay family, and they were a major catalyst for starting me in the right direction towards not just my orientation, but later my gender identity. So it was really thanks to these three guys that my college was so successful. I majored in art, and this was my art professor. I majored in sociology, or minored in sociology and religion, and these two were huge reasons for that. They were just amazing and guided me through such a difficult period. So ultimately, experience itself is learning, because no matter what situation you're in, even if you're being told that you're ignorant, as I was in college, by staff, not necessarily professors, but it doesn't matter. You know, again, you know who you are, and you can look at every experience as some type of learning. Yes, college taught me things, but if it weren't for the books that I also read, the discussions that I had with a wide variety of different people, all those things added up to this beautiful, well-rounded experience of learning. And that can happen in any situation. It doesn't have to be college itself. So after college, again, still not totally sure what I wanted to do. Now I'm an art major. Like, what do you do with that? And so I took a position with the AmeriCorps Vista program. This allowed me to work with a charity, and in exchange, they would give me a chunk of money at the end of my service in order to help pay off student loan debt. And I did that for the Christian Appalachian Project. I worked with their marketing department, creating giving catalogs, that kind of thing. But it just wasn't for me. I thought it was what I wanted to do, but it wasn't for me ultimately, that industry of being in marketing for charities. And so I moved to Nashville, a newlywed, and after not being able to find a good job of any kind, I wandered over to Craigslist and found a job posted that sounded too good to be true. After a very unconventional interview in which I showed up to a stranger's house for the interview, which I do not recommend at all, especially now. This was some years ago, 13 or so. But after a very unconventional interview, I was hired, and sorry about that, and kicked off the rest of my career to this point. They hired me to fix up this horrendous website, which I took from Wayback Machine just to prove how terrible it was. But ultimately, we were able to grow what started as a family business into something over the next several years that caught the eyes of industry analysts, and we were acquired by KnowBe4. So ultimately, this is about seizing opportunities. Open up your mind. Don't go to a stranger's house for an interview, but keep your eyes open. Think out of the box in terms of jobs and things like that. So I'm gonna have to rush through the last few. I'll say that hacker conferences, when I first experienced them, it felt like homecoming, like this sense of, holy crap, here are people who are like me, you know? And that was beautiful. I had never met hackers in person. I had only talked to them facelessly behind a computer screen. And so, yeah, unfortunately, that's also where I've experienced the most sexism in my career. The information security industry has been notorious for that side, and luckily it is changing. There's a lot of people who have had a hand in making sure that it changes, but yeah, it was often disheartening, but ultimately so essential to find a community of weirdos and like-minded individuals just like you. Not only is it just good for your human soul, they can also help you and challenge you in the way that a mentor can as well. So from SAC, I bounced into an executive position once we started integrating into KnowBe4. This was taken just before that happened. And suddenly I was the sole executive leader in charge of nearly 20 people, whereas before it had been at the least a 3-person team. But the thing is, everyone feels like an imposter at some point. Often many points, sometimes all the time. Very few people know what they're doing, and if they say that they do 100%, there are very few times when you should trust that. Many people don't know what they're doing and feel like imposters, trust me. And so the keys to my success have been these 3 things: leading from compassion, rooting out inefficiencies specifically so that my team can do their jobs better, and growing together as a team. If a learning opportunity jumps out, then my first instinct is to seize it together, to learn alongside. And ultimately, just a lot of leading by example, trying to set a good example for my incredible team who teaches me every single day, honestly. So, quick wrap up. Jump into deep water. As women, especially, we undersell our capabilities. But as it says here, I say jump right into the depths. That's exactly how I ended up here, taking a lot of risks and seizing opportunities that were terrifying, so uncomfortable, absolutely did not think I could do it, all those things. But trust me, just jump in and admit when you don't know something. Again, this is kind of what I was getting at about people who say they know what they're doing. Like, if you don't know something, it's better to say, I don't know, but I'll find out, than to BS. Just trust me on that one too. And be a team player. I was a group project hater, but being in charge of such an amazing team of people makes me sing the praises of being a team player. So I'm at my own time limit, but ultimately I'll just flash these up quickly. Oh, okay, cool. Again, as I said in the beginning, I've talked about the sexism and all of those terrible things that I've experienced, and others have experienced even worse than I have. But I also have disabilities that are invisible, and part of going from surviving to thriving has been learning how to thrive with disabilities. And so these were the key points for me when I reflected. Creating your own user manual. I saw that once and I just really love that idea, even if you don't write it out, although I encourage you to do that. It's kind of fun. Create a user manual for yourself. When do you like to wake up and go to sleep? How do you like to be managed in a job? What do you like to do? How do you like to work? Do you like coffee or tea? Just fun little things like that. It can help you ultimately do this last one, which is embrace how your brain works. And it's so important. We're all unique for a reason. And that uniqueness is what makes you special and perfect the way that you are. The main ones outside of that are self-advocacy. My therapist has told me that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And as hard as that is to swallow, especially in times when I just need someone else to advocate for me, I just don't have the energy or strength. I just hear in my head, squeaky, squeaky, squeaky. Because if you think about it, you don't grease non-squeaky wheels, right? So be that squeaky wheel for yourself. Find out about accommodations, whether it's flexible work schedules, mental health days, whatever it may be. Make sure you pay attention to finances. That's all I'll say about that. It is important, especially if you come from poverty, to gain financial literacy. I learned that firsthand the hard way, for sure. This was keys to buying my first house, though, which was huge. It felt like someone was about to come and take it away from me. And finally, quick resources. There's a lot of free and cheap education. As I said, YouTube and Skillshare are especially key nowadays to accessible education, at least dipping your toes into things. One idea that I think might be cool is to teach yourself by giving. So if you have a charity or a charitable cause that you support, or local charities wherever you are, see if you could volunteer to do something for them. You wouldn't necessarily get paid for it. You'd be giving your time, but that's a great way to learn to do something and help build up your experience. The Nice Job framework, if you're interested in cybersecurity, you can Google this. I believe it's Workforce Framework, but they list out all the different ways that someone can get into cybersecurity, because trust me, it's really varied. So with that, thank you, and thank you for allowing me to go over a little bit on my own time. But yeah.
No problem. Let me get our other screen back up here. Go. So I've got our Q&A slide up in the background. So we're going to touch on a couple more things before we close for the evening and get to our Q&A. So make sure you get those questions typed in there. I know I've got a running list of a couple already out myself, so get those questions in. And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you, as soon as the slide cooperates, there we go. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of our resources. So I promise we did not twist her arm to hype up library programs, but we do have so many resources. And, you know, my favorite price point is free, and everything the library does is free. So if you're at all on the fence about, you know, getting into this line of work or maybe another IT related field, this is a good place to start. Yes, college is fantastic. It's a great option for a lot of people, but it's absolutely not required to break into this field. You can start small by doing free online classes, work your way up to a professional certification. There are so many paths to get into this industry. So I've got one pulled up here. So through our LinkedIn Learning that we have, you just go to hcplc.org/online classes, go to that LinkedIn Learning tab, and there are actual full certifications available through that. Maybe not the C++ and some of the fancier ones, but they do have some really good test prep classes on there. But also, I pulled up some IT security specialist type courses that they do have on there. So you're going to see like these are like 20-hour, 24-hour classes. I mean, that's borderline doing a minor for some of these. So it's worth looking at if this is something that you want to do for yourself. You don't have to let finances stand in the way of this. The library can support that kind of learning. So I wanted to make sure I got that shout out. And we do have a couple more programs coming up for Women's History Month. So check our calendar for that, hcplc.org/events. We'll always have our calendar up to date on there, or scan the QR code. Want to make sure that you know about all those events. We also have book lists and other resources linked there. So check that out on our Women's History Month page, currently linked on the home page. All right, I think we're ready for our Q&A. So I hope you've gotten those questions typed in there and gotten started on that. Ms. Vivian's keeping an eye out on those. So I'm going to jump in. Let me look at my notes here. So I loved what you were saying, but you never know when you're going to meet your next best teacher, because it might not be in the classroom. Your best mentor, your best teacher might not necessarily be in the classroom. So I love that. That's also been true in my life, and I know a lot of other people's lives as well.
Yeah.
Miss Vivian, how are we doing?
Oh, am I good now?
Yep, there we go.
Okay. So you didn't hear anything I said. No, it's okay. No, we have a few questions. So one of the questions that came in is, what is your most exciting project to date?
Ooh, to date. Gosh, that's hard.
It was putting this program together, wasn't it?
How did you know? I think, okay, I have two, 1.5. One I'll say is the book that I'm working on illustrating with Win Schwartau, because he is also one of those mentors. Started out as that original boss, but definitely a mentor now. And so it's just always fun working alongside him. But outside of that, the thing I would say is planning. So I'll step back. My job involves innovation and figuring out how we can take our courseware content to the next level. And so I created an internal summit along with my team member who runs the specific innovation stuff. And we got a bunch of people from internal to come together for 2 days and just brainstorm and talk. And it was just amazing. A lot of people said afterwards that usually they're really worn out by conferences, but they were all really energized. And so that was like, okay, I did a good job then.
That is so true. Conferences can be so exhausting, and if people are walking away from that energized and excited, that is a hard win.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And then one question that came in was more, it was regarding, I guess, LinkedIn. So someone on here had tried to go into LinkedIn classes. They were wanting to know if it's totally free with the library card, because I guess on LinkedIn they have mentioned something about a free trial.
So it sounds like you went into the LinkedIn Learning directly through LinkedIn. What you want to do is start at the library homepage. So go to hcplc.org/online classes and go to LinkedIn Learning through that page. It'll ask you for your library card number and information to log in that way. So you're not going to go in through LinkedIn Learning directly. The free access, you'll go through the library website first and log in with your library card. But yes, then at that point, it's totally free. So yeah, if it's asking you to do a free trial, it is not ours.
Right. And then one more question, and it's any like top skills that anyone who wants to work in tech, what would they need?
I guess so. It really depends on the area of tech that you would be interested in. There's so many different varieties of tech just in general. And then even once you break those down, like cybersecurity, which is my industry, even that has several different categories. So I think the first question that you'll have to ask yourself is what area of tech do you want to get into, and then follow that line of thinking. A lot of times it's going to be, even if you don't want to learn programming, understanding how computers work in general will absolutely help you. So computer science, basic stuff, at least, for sure.
It can be good to have that baseline to start from, so you're all speaking the same language.
Exactly. Yeah, my developers love to tease me about how I don't code anymore, but I can still communicate what I need them to do. So
Yep, that makes sense. We do have some code camps for kids through the library. We have Fiero Code, which is a pretty fun way to get started. And I say it's for kids, but I'm not going to lie, I didn't grow up coding, and I've been playing with it just so that I know what's being talked about. So try that out. Looks like we've had a few more questions come in. I just see somebody mentioned that MIT also has a lot of free online classes. And yes, absolutely. There's tons of free curriculum out there through the library and other places. So yeah, check those out.
And then we have another comment that came in. I guess they're wanting to know if the mass layoffs in IT, if you can address the mass layoffs in IT from various companies. Apparently they have a boss that's a genius and amazing with recent diplomas in cybersecurity, but he is close to 50 years of age and is unable to get just different jobs. Let's see. Is there any kind of like, I guess, is there definitely like an age discrimination? Have you noticed anything like that?
That's a really good question. I
can speak to that a little bit when you're done as well.
Okay. I know that in general, last year was hard for a lot of tech companies. And I hate to hear that. In general, my experience has been from the opposite end, where I've experienced discrimination based on being young, especially because I look a lot younger than I actually am. But that dynamic could be different in different states and in different areas of tech or cybersecurity as well.
The one thing that I would say is it's, especially regarding these specific layoffs, is that you'll see that go in phases a lot of times. And when the companies are downsizing, a lot of times it's easier for them to start with because they're going to be doing something else. They're going to be doing a new thing. They're not going to disappear. But a lot of times you'll find that the new thing that they're doing requires a slightly different skill set.
Yeah.
And it's easier for them to start with a whole new workforce that already has that new skill set than to retrain the folks that they're quality employees, but they don't have that specific tool in their arsenal. So at that point, it becomes a matter of you have this huge group of people that are highly skilled, but they're going to have to find those jobs in that niche that they're working in themselves. So it's happened. I used to work in the HR side of things for companies that handle this, and it was something that you saw time and time again, that it would go through phases like that. The one tip that I can give for that, and it's something that we teach in our job skills building classes, is that when you're putting together your resume, you don't necessarily need to list every job you've ever had, especially if you're shall we say, more experienced job seeker. You might want to just list the most, the 10 most recent years of work that you did, where it's only going to show your very relevant, very current jobs. Because a lot of the things that you did when you first entered the workforce 20, 30 years ago, sure, it shows a great continuity of employment, but it's not necessarily going to be relevant to the job that you're applying for. So sometimes it makes sense to just focus your resume on a shorter period of time. So I know that's not exactly what you asked, but it's a tip that is often useful for the folks going back into the workforce after a situation like that.
I think too, just one more idea, linking up with professional networks and communities of interest. I recently joined the NICE, it's literally NICE, National Institute of Cybersecurity Education, community of interest. And I did so because not only do I care about what they're doing, but I heard so many different projects that people started just because they were like, hey, I really want to do this. Is anyone in this community doing this? And things like that. So you could maybe explore that as well.
Yeah, definitely networking is always a smart move. All right, I think our questions are done. I don't see any new ones in here. So if you have any last minute questions, get them in. But while you're typing that in, I'll give you our contact information. It's up on the slide here. You can reach us anytime at hcplc.org/contact. That has all of our information on it, including our phone number, 813-273-3652. And I've got Kayley's information up here. So she's going to be at linktree/KMelt. So if you go to that, her Linktree will have all of her contact information and links to different resources on there. And of course, if you pop on the library calendar, hcplc.org/events, you'll see all of our great upcoming programs. Don't forget, you're going to get a survey after the program. It'll pop up right when you close out, or we'll send it it'll get sent by email. But either way, make sure you fill out that survey. Let us know what you thought of today, and let us know what kind of topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. We'd love to hear from you. Kayley, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us this evening. I know it's going to do a lot of good for folks that were on the program today and that might be watching it later. So really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us.
Yes, yeah, Kayley, thank you. You're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
We will see you all next time, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Night.